It's 3:20. Good afternoon. Every couple of weeks on the programme, we speak to environmental experts in our region about the climate crisis to look at the big breakthroughs, areas of concern and, of course, political action and the ramifications of as well. Now, the US has pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, one of President Trump's first acts since his inauguration. But what is this agreement and why is it so important? Well, Professor Aled Jones is the director of the Global Institute for Sustainability at Anglia Ruskin University. Professor Aled, as always, thank you for being with us. Let's start at the beginning. A basics guide to global agreements. What's the Paris Climate Agreement and why is it important?
Yeah, sure. So the Paris Agreement is part of a long series of agreements. So previously we've had the Kyoto Agreement, and it's part of the originally this Rio Earth Summit back in 1972 that set up all of these different processes. So it's under the United Nations, and countries around the world gather together every year to discuss what they want to do about climate change. Every 5 years, they're supposed to report against their progress, and every now and again, they come up with another milestone that sets out another set of commitments. So the last one of those was in 2015 in Paris, where the meeting was held, which is why it's called the Paris Agreement. And that committed the governments to go further than they had committed before, with the main aim of keeping the global temperature rise above pre-industrial levels to 2 degrees, and if possible to keep it below 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial. So that was the ambition around temperature. It also then set up a number of other voluntary commitments and targets, including around mobilizing finance. So they wanted to raise around $100 billion per year to support countries global south, to decarbonize, to build renewable infrastructure, to protect themselves against climate change. That's recently to $300 billion per year. So it's kind of this big agreement that most countries in the world have signed up to.
Is the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Agreement before that, and whichever one will be next, are they seen as tangible, useful things? Do we see results from them, or is there an element of people thinking, well, actually, it's politicians posturing and nothing good comes of them?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. They're absolutely essential in that they offer this umbrella under which action can be taken, and countries are really reluctant to go it alone. We need this sort of place where they feel safe to then do bold actions in their own countries. Do they go far enough? Do they push countries? No, absolutely not. It's a voluntary agreement, so even if a country signs up to it, if they don't meet their targets or if they don't meet the commitment, then absolutely nothing happens. You know, how a country would be able to say, well, we haven't met our commitment to the 1.5 degrees. It also doesn't go down to country level, it's at the global level. So what it means to fail at Paris isn't clear until it's too late. So it's an absolutely essential global agreement, but it certainly doesn't go far enough. It doesn't really have teeth. It's voluntary, so it kind of allows countries to collaborate, but doesn't then force them to do anything.
There are some pretty key countries that aren't on it, and I only know this because the US has now joined that curious list of who isn't on it. North Korea, for example. What does the withdrawal of the United States mean? What are those ramifications going to be for the US and, of course, for the rest of us?
Yeah, so there's not many countries that aren't part of it. For the previous agreements, there were far more, but now the United States joins North Korea, Libya, Yemen, and Iran, who aren't part of it. So it's a sort of slightly strange list of countries. Basically, it depends on whether you think being part of the club is really important in terms of delivering real action. Now, Donald Trump, when he was president last time, he also pulled the US out, and it didn't really have that much of an impact. And what's happened this time is that all the countries have come around and said, actually, we're still going to be part of it. We're still going to be committed to it. So it may be that the US does try and drill for more oil, expand its fossil fuel industry a bit more, which will contribute to climate change. But it may also be that it just loses out on this global renewable innovation game that we're now seeing happening. So China's certainly saying, well, we're just going to carry on investing in renewables. Europe is saying we're carrying on investing in renewables. strangely, under the Biden administration, he put in place this thing called the Inflation Reduction Act, which included a huge investment in the renewables industry in the US. So the actual practical, tangible impact on industry, it really depends on what happens on the ground with the US. So suddenly we see all of these high-tech renewable energy companies in the US saying, okay, we don't want to be in the US anymore. We'll go to Canada, we'll go to China, we'll go to Europe. That'll offer some more growth opportunities for those countries. There'll be more competitive advantage. And essentially over the medium term, you will see the US losing out in market share. When Trump and the people who are investing in business in the US really realize that, they may carry on investing. They may still not rejoin the Paris Agreement. It's only voluntary anyway. But I'd be surprised if they stop investing in business and in growth and in domestic jobs, which is also what he says he wants to see happening in the US.
Aled, there are lots of letters and numbers associated with any conversation around climate change. The race for net zero 2030 or 2050, agreements and accords, the 1.5 figure we see, it's quite overwhelming in terms of headline grabbing numbers. In terms of the letters, obviously we've got the UN, we've got the Paris Agreement. Are there any other key bits of legislation or global movements to which we're attached, or is this the key thing?
This is the key thing. So the Paris Agreement comes out of the other three-letter acronym, the COP process, which is the Conference of Parties. So that's where all the governments do meet every year. So the climate change is mostly spoken about there. There are then some smaller agreements that come out underneath that, and especially when you look more regionally. So Europe has the Green Deal, which is doing a lot of its investment. That was partly in response, or that is in development, to the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA in the US. And the UK is now similarly using a lot of new policy to encourage investment domestically. So there'll be a lot more bilateral agreement, and they'll all have different acronyms. And within the EU, a lot of it comes under this thing called the Green Deal. And Green Deal is being adopted in lots of countries as the way of describing policy towards climate change, whether that's net zero or just renewable innovation, more infrastructure, and more opportunities for green skills and green jobs.
Aled, thank you as always for your time. Is there any breaking news from the GIS that you want to share with us this afternoon? I know you've got this huge grant to do great work around global food security, but anything else that's happened at your centre that you want to tell us about?
We're really interested in actually, and especially with the Trump announcement around climate anxiety. So working with
hands up, yes, I can tick those boxes.
Yes. So working with theatre groups in Norfolk, with local community groups around this sort of nature connectedness, but how people talk about it, and you know, the youth in the region, and we've got lots of youth groups going out and campaigning, but we're seeing a lot of climate anxiety. So we're really interested. We've got a number of small projects working with local communities, looking at how people think about climate change and climate anxiety, and what we can do to help people go through that process, and what the conversations people are having, and how to help them feel more empowered and more able to take action so that the anxiety diminishes a bit.
That is a great idea. Should we wait to hear more from you? Is there an email address we can get in touch if we are feeling like that?
Yeah, you can get in touch with us at gsi-info@aru.ac.uk, or you can usually find me and send me an email if people are interested in that, and I'll put people in touch with the right people in the GSI who are running those actions.
Amazing. Professor Aled Jones, Director of the Global Institute for Sustainability at the ARU, thank you as always for your time. Just coming up to 3:30.